The hills of Flanders were green once, dotted with sheep and daffodils that bent under the spring wind like children bowing in prayer. In a village cradled by those hills, the laughter of boys echoed louder than the church bells, and among them ran a barefooted child named Emil Voss. He was slight, with a mop of dust-blonde hair and a gaze far too solemn for his 9 years. His father, Hendrik, was the village's postman, a patient man with cracked hands who spoke little but smiled often. His mother, Clara, baked bread for the wounded veterans who limped into the parish for charity. Peace was not something they named, it simply was, like the sun and the river and the dog that always returned home. Then came the posters. Blood-red letters screamed in the town square. Verkaiser under Vaterland. German boots marched past the boundary stones as if they had always belonged. Some in the village cheered, others watched in mute dread. Hendrik's eyes didn't leave the horizon for days. Then, one dusk in August, he kissed Clara's hand, knelt before Emil, and walked down the road in a soldier's coat, carrying no weapon, only a leather satchel strapped across his chest. He did not look back. Clara began sleeping in her apron, waiting for news. The village turned strange. Overnight men vanished. Ration lines grew longer. Emil, once a shadow darting through orchard trees, was told to stay inside, but he did not. His father's satchel hung on the coat rack now, still holding letters tied with ribbon. Each day, Emil wore it across his chest and mimicked the route his father once walked. He carried no real letters, just folded paper with scribbles, written to no one, pretending they were messages of peace. And so it was that a child began carrying words into a world that was losing them. The first time Emil heard the sky scream, he dropped to the ground and cried into the dirt. Shells tore through the morning like angry gods, and the wheat fields became waves of smoke and bone. German soldiers' boys, no older than his cousins. Through the village, they did not burn everything, only the church and the house with the hidden rifle, and the barn where someone had spoken English too loudly. Clara pulled Emil into the cellar as neighbors begged heaven for silence. It came only after the priest was dragged into the square. No one would speak of what was done to him. Only the dog barked, and even it went quiet after a while. Weeks passed like ghosts. Word arrived that Hendrik was missing. Not dead, not captured. Just missing, probably desertion. Someone whispered, like it was a prayer or a curse. Clara's face changed. Not hardened, emptied. Her hands never stopped moving after that, kneading dough that no longer rose, mending socks no one wore. She looked past Emil even when she held him, but Emil began carrying real letters now. Soldiers, both German and French, passed through the ruined roads. Sometimes they gave him messages, sometimes a few coins. For your bread, they would say. But one man, in a coat too large for his frame, gave Emil something else, a sealed letter and a warning. If it is ever opened by the wrong eyes, he said, you and I are both dead. The trenches smelled of old blood and rat piss, of wet wool and hopelessness. Emil had never meant to come here, not truly. But the soldier with the letter had not met him at the drop point, and curiosity or fate drew him forward. A French Manek let him pass, mistaking him for a runner. At the front, no one asked questions of small boys carrying messages. They had seen stranger angels in worse places. He wandered the lines, sometimes stopping to translate letters for Moroccan riflemen who couldn't read French, or to sit beside dying British lads who mistook him for their little brothers. In one trench, a man with grey eyes and no fingers sang lullabies in Flemish, until the gas made him forget the words. In another, Emile found a black Canadian soldier named Thompson who gave him sugar cubes and whispered stories of a hot place called New Orleans. Men wept in the dark. They wrote letters and asked Emile to deliver them, and he always said yes. But some letters he rewrote. A man shot through the lungs would beg Emile, "Tell my wife I died sleeping. Tell my boy I smiled." And Emile would nod, and the truth would vanish under his pencil. But not every story could be softened. One night, in the cratered stillness between barrages, Emile opened the sealed letter. He could not understand most of it. The handwriting was neat but strange, and the French too perfect. But he recognized two words that chilled him to the marrow: firing squad. Snow fell in December like forgiveness. Emile huddled in the dugout of the 4th Royal Scots, a unit too tired to care that a child had become their ghost. They called him the Sparrow, and he slept with their letters beneath his coat, like feathers, guarding his heart. They didn't know about the execution orders. They didn't know the soldier who gave Emile the sealed envelope had been a deserter, nor that the note revealed the names of 2 others who had fled with him. Emile hadn't told them. He couldn't. He watched those men now, laughing in the cold, sharing tea, tossing cards in a tin hat. On Christmas Eve, something strange began. A voice from the German line, singing Still Not. Then another voice from the Scots, Silent Night. A ceasefire followed, as if the earth itself had pleaded for a breath. Candles lit up along the ridges. Men who had tried to kill each other shared cigarettes, photos, songs. Emile stood in the middle of no man's land, watching the miracle unfold. One of the accused deserters offered a German soldier a tin of jam. The German replied with chocolate. Snowflakes fell on them both, but Emile could not smile. In his coat was still the letter, and he knew what morning would bring. At dawn, the singing was gone. No candles, no laughter, just wind whistling through barbed wire and the return of silence, that sharp-edged silence that lives between war drums. The truce had ended, as all fragile things do. The soldiers climbed back into their sides of the earth, hands that had just shaken now, clenched rifles. Orders resumed like clockwork in a world without time. But Emile did not move. He stood at the edge of the trench, like someone waiting for a train that would never come. In his pocket, the letter pressed against his ribs, burning like guilt. He hadn't told the officers. He hadn't handed it over. He had looked at the men. Charlie Dempsey and Ian Tovey held their eyes across the firelight, and thought, they laughed like fathers. They gave me sugar. They let me sleep where it was warm. And so he did nothing, but the silence betrayed them. On the morning of December 27th, word spread like frost. A secret court-martial held before the truce. 3 names read aloud. One had already died in no man's land. The other, to Charlie and Ian, was summoned without ceremony. No explanation, no defense. The orders had come from high command, untouched by the peace of Christmas or the pleas of any soldier. Emile tried to speak. He approached the captain, letter in hand, knees shaking. But before he reached the man, he saw another boy, no older than 16, being marched to the post. A different unit, a different name. His face was white, not from fear, but from betrayal. You wrote it, he whispered. You gave them my name. Emile stopped. The boy looked straight at him, and though Emile had not written that letter, he had carried others, to many others. He didn't even know what half of them had said. Maybe one of them had sealed this. Boys' fate. Maybe all of them had. The boy spat, not at Emil, but into the mud. Then the blindfold came down, the shots rang out like punches. That night, Emil couldn't sleep. He buried the letter beneath a frozen log and cried into his own hands. Not because he had been wrong, not because the war had broken some rule, but because he had realized the truth. He had become part of it, not just a witness, not a sparrow, fluttering between sides. A messenger of death in a child's skin, and he hated it. 2 days later, they came for Charlie and Iane. The execution was scheduled for before sunrise. Pour le moral, they said, to make an example, to harden the others. But the men did not grow harder. They grew quiet, sick. One of them vomited into his boots. Another wept silently while pretending to clean his rifle. Emil ran. Not far, just far enough to feel the illusion of escape. The cold air burned his lungs. He ran until the trench sounds faded and only the breath of the trees remained. There, among blackened stumps and broken snow, he found a hollower, forgotten place where someone had once tried to plant hope. A smashed crate of carrier pigeons, now scattered and dead. But one pigeon still breathed, feebly, wings tucked against frost. It blinked at him. Emil picked it up, hands trembling. He had nothing to feed it, no warmth to offer. But the bird didn't resist. It was as tired as he was. He didn't return to the trench until it was over. The morning sky had already begun to bleach with light when he arrived. The post was still standing. The blood was fresh. The names were gone. He asked no one what had happened. No one would meet his eyes. Later, Thompson the Canadian found him beneath a tarp. "You knew, didn't you?" he said, kneeling, about the order. Emil nodded. His face was blank. "You tried to stop it?" "No." He shook his head. "I hid it." Thompson looked away. Then he nodded slowly and took a folded slip of paper from his coat. "You want something real to carry?" he asked. Emil took it. The note read, "There's a way out through the southern line. Fog at dawn. Take the boy if you can. Tell no one." That night, as the stars blinked like cold warnings in the sky, Emil made his choice. Fog draped the land like a shroud. The air smelled of metal and frost. Emil walked beside Thompson, the pigeon cradled in his arms, the paper tied to its leg. Neither of them spoke. The escape was not cinematic, no dramatic music, no sudden shout of discovery, just a careful crossing of wire and mud, 100 small prayers to a silent God. Emil tripped once. Thompson caught him. At one point, they heard voices French. Close but slipped behind a crumbling trench wall and waited until silence returned. By the time they reached the forest edge, the pigeons stirred. "I think it's ready," Emil said softly. Thompson nodded. "Let it go." The boy raised the bird high, whispered something inaudible, and released it. It soared, higher and higher. The sky was still dark, but one sliver of dawn had begun to crack the horizon. Then the shot came, not from the front. From behind, Thompson stumbled. Blood burst from his side. He didn't scream, just crumpled into the roots of a tree like a soldier going home. A silhouette emerged from the trees. An officer. Emil couldn't see his face, only the shape of his anger. The man raised his rifle again. Emil didn't run. He stood over Thompson's body, chest heaving, eyes filled not with fear, but fury. "You already killed them," he said, voice shaking. "You already killed enough." The rifle lowered. For a moment, The man stared at the boy, as if seeing himself years ago standing in some other war, over some other grave. Then he turned and vanished into the mist by the time help arrived. Summoned by the pigeon's message, Emile was curled beside Thompson's body, holding his hand like a brother would. They buried Thompson on the hill, no marker, no flag, just a cross made of branches and a line carved in the bark of a tree. He carried hope. Emile was taken in by a nurse's station far from the line. He never went back to the trenches. He stopped carrying letters. But sometimes, in the quiet of the ward, he would take out a pencil and write a name, one he remembered or dreamed or imagined. Then he would burn the paper and scatter the ash dots. In time, the war ended. Men returned, not whole, but breathing. And in one village, tucked between the silent hills of Flanders, a dog still waited on the porch for a master who never came.